Do you know what is quieter than a grave? The sound of a clock ticking in the living room after you've just destroyed your own brother's life for an inheritance you didn't even need. I had just killed the beginning of his life, and strangely, I felt so refreshed today. I hate the smell of hospitals. That antiseptic scent is like the smell of failure sprayed with expensive perfume. And my brother Joey was the king there. The youngest neurosurgeon, the most handsome, the most adored by mother. And me, I was just a pharmacist in the basement, a pill counter who never existed unless someone had a stomachache. The end of a beginning, that's what I wrote in my personal journal when I decided to stop the beginning of Joey's brilliant career. I was tired of being a shadow. I was tired of hearing Mother say, if only you were as smart as your brother. Okay, I would show them I was smarter in something they'd never imagine: destruction. As a senior pharmacist, I had access to everything. I knew Joey took vitamins regularly to maintain his surgical stamina. It was so easy for me. A little dose manipulation, a little mix of modified beta blockers so the effect wouldn't be immediate, but slowly made the motor nerves in his fingertips weak. I did it with microscopic calculation. Every concoction was the most sincere form of love I had for him. The problem was, Joey was tough. He noticed something was off, but he was too arrogant to admit he was weak. That was when Skylar, his beautiful and innocent fiancée, started asking questions. I didn't need much effort to make her believe Joey was depressed and starting to turn to drugs. I showed her some empty bottles I had arranged just so. The manipulation was like compounding medicine. It required patience and the right measure of lies. The climax happened during some big minister's operation, or whoever it was. I didn't care. The night before, Joey came home looking pale. He said his hand kept twitching. I, with the most convincing angelic face, gave him my own tranquilizer. I told him it was the safest herbal concoction. He drank it, saying, "Thanks, little bro. You're the only one I can trust." I wanted to laugh out loud when he said that. It felt like fireworks in my chest. Ridiculous, right? The next day, chaos erupted at the hospital. Joey failed completely. In the middle of the most crucial neurosurgery, his hand went numb. The patient survived, but would never walk again. Joey's career? Over on the spot. The medical committee intervened immediately. I was there, in the front row, crying the loudest, hugging mother who had fainted, while secretly savoring an incredible adrenaline rush. When I returned to my personal lab, I tidied all my vials. I arranged them by height, perfectly aligned, not a single millimeter out of place. This order kept me sane. I saw my reflection in the glass bottles and smiled. Finally, this stage was mine alone. Now Joey was just a human wreck sitting in a rocking chair every day, staring at the blank wall, asking, why? Skylar had left, and Mother now depended solely on me, the faithful pharmacist child. I often fed her porridge, whispering softly in her ear, "Don't worry, big brother, this is just the beginning of a beautiful end for us." She could only cry silently. Absurd, isn't it? People say blood is thicker than water. But to me, blood is just red liquid easily tainted if you know the right chemicals. I didn't feel guilty. Why should I? I was just balancing the scales of fate that had always tipped in his favor. So, for those of you with a sibling who seems perfect in the eyes of your parents, don't be sad. You don't need to be smarter than them. You just need to know where they put their drinking glass every night. Which substance would be perfect to stop their arrogance from beating. But it turns out, toppling a tower doesn't automatically make you king of the rubble. 3 months after Joey lost his license, the house felt strange. Silent, but like static constantly buzzing in my ears. Joey barely moved, just sat, staring out the window, trembling the result of my most precise work of art. New trouble appeared while I was organizing the drug stock in the hospital basement pharmacy. Gustavo, the head of pharmaceutical audits whose mustache always smelled of cheap tobacco, came with a red folder. He said there were discrepancies in propranolol stock and several strong sedatives over the last 6 months. There are unrecorded withdrawals from the system, but physically missing, he said, staring at me through his thick glasses. At that moment, my heart felt like it would leap out, but my face? Calm, cold. I took a slow breath, switching to survival mode. I told him maybe it was a vendor data entry mistake, and I would do an independent audit tonight. Gustavo just nodded, but his eyes, those eyes seemed to be searching for a crack in my mask. I returned home with a splitting headache. There, I saw Mother crying while massaging Joey's stiff legs. Irony at its peak. I was the one who paralyzed him, yet I had to pay for all his nursing bills, with the inheritance money now under my name. "Little bro, please look after your brother," Mother whimpered. "He kept saying your name." Like he wanted to say something but couldn't. I approached Joey. I sat in front of him, his body now carrying the scent of cold sweat and depression meds. As I prepared to give him water, Joey's usually weak hand suddenly gripped my wrist. Tight. His eyes, once empty, were suddenly sharp. He stared at me as if every cloud in his mind had vanished in a second. "You pharmacy," he whispered hoarsely. Just 2 words, but it felt like a death sentence. I panicked. My ritual of calm was cracking. I ran to the kitchen, arranging the dish rack until it clanged loudly, lining up glasses by milliliter size just to stop myself from screaming. I had to erase the last traces. I had to clean the remaining concoctions in my personal lab before Gustavo or the police arrived with a search warrant. That night, at 3 a.m., I carried a box of empty vials and dosage notes to the backyard. I dug deep under a frangipani tree. In the darkness, under the drizzle that made my clothes stick, I felt real fear. This was no longer about envy or revenge. It was about how not to end up in a cell with the people I once despised. As I shoveled the soil, suddenly the porch light turned on. I looked up and saw Joey standing at the sliding door, one hand against the wall, his body leaning. He just stood there, under the dim yellow light, watching me holding a shovel like a grave digger. He didn't scream. He just stood silently. The next day, Gustavo didn't come to my office. Instead, a summons came from the Central Ethics Committee. It turned out Joey's silence the night before wasn't forgiveness. He had sent a text via his tablet, which I thought he didn't know how to use, to his colleagues at the hospital. Now I sit in the waiting room, cold as Joey's old operating theater. I know this is the end of the beginning of my life as a winner. I look at my right hand, the hand that had so precisely compounded the destruction of others, now starting to twitch. Just like Joey's hand. Funny, isn't it? It turns out the deadliest poison isn't a beta blocker or sedative. The most potent poison is satisfaction that makes you careless. I feel like I hear Joey's laughter echoing in the distance, even though I know he can't even smile. So for those of you who think you've won decisively, don't forget to check your own shadow. Sometimes, even the person you've crippled still has enough strength to pull you into the same pit.